I didn't cry when Ryan broke up with me. I sat there across from him at that overpriced rooftop bar, my fingers clenched around the stem of my wine glass, watching his mouth move while he fed me the lines he'd probably rehearsed in the mirror. "You're great, Ella, seriously. But I need someone who fits better into the life I'm building." I tilted my head, pretending not to understand. "What life is that, exactly?" He smiled, that smug little tilt he wore whenever he thought he was being clever. "Executive life. Partner track. You know what it takes: polish, presence, image. It's about who you bring to the table. You're smart, but you're more, behind the scenes. You're just not wife material." I didn't even blink. I just took a sip of wine, nodded, and excused myself. He didn't follow. He probably thought I was being dramatic, storming off. I wasn't. I was calculating. Because here's the thing about being underestimated: it gives you freedom. And I intended to use every bit of it. 2 weeks later, I handed in my resignation. No drama, no tearful goodbyes. Just a polite email, a clean desk, and a final glance at Ryan laughing by the printer with Claire, the department head's niece who had suddenly started hanging around him a little too conveniently after our breakup. I walked out of that office with nothing but a tote bag, a silent grudge, and a plan. I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I wasn't going to fight for my place at that firm. I was going to build something so untouchable, they'd have no choice but to see what they threw away. The first 6 months were hard. I worked contract jobs while finishing my MBA at night. I networked, took low-paying projects that taught me everything I needed to know about investor decks, leadership, and how real decisions got made in boardrooms. Then I joined a startup that no one thought would survive its first year. It had a shaky prototype, no name recognition, and a ridiculously demanding founder named Daniel. But I saw something in it. And more importantly, I saw something in myself. I wasn't just smart. I was sharp. I was resourceful. And I was ready to prove that the version of me Ryan rejected was just the first draft. Daniel didn't like anyone at first. But he respected results. And I delivered. I helped rebrand the company, clean up their pitch, and bring in the kind of clients that made VCs pay attention. Within 2 years, we went from cramped co-working desks to a high-rise headquarters downtown. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, Daniel stopped seeing me as just another employee. I didn't chase it. In fact, I avoided it. But he was persistent, not just in business, but in everything. He said I made him think clearer. That I was the only person who didn't lie to impress him. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was trying to forget a man who once told me I wasn't worth standing beside. So when Daniel proposed, after a particularly brutal week of negotiations, I didn't say yes right away. I looked at him and asked, "Are you marrying me because I'm useful?" He didn't flinch. "I'm marrying you because you're the sharpest mind I've ever met. And the only person I trust with both the company and my name." It wasn't a romantic speech. But it was honest. And for a woman who'd once been told she wasn't fit to be a partner, that meant more than roses and poetry ever could. We kept it quiet. I didn't care about announcements or diamond rings on social media. I cared about impact. Influence. And the day that Daniel's company acquired a mid-sized marketing firm to expand its portfolio, I recognized the name immediately. My old company. Ryan's company. The acquisition memo hit their inboxes on a Monday morning. New leadership structure. New protocols. All under the direction of CEO Daniel Cole and his executive partner, Ella Cole. I didn't schedule my return right away. I let the suspense build. Let the rumors swirl. Then, on the day of the company-wide integration meeting, I walked back through those glass doors in a tailored black suit, heels clicking on the marble floors, wedding band flashing under the fluorescent lights. People turned. Whispered. Stared. But Ryan? Ryan stood frozen by the coffee machine, half stirring his drink, jaw slack. He looked exactly the same. A little older. Slightly more tired. But still wearing that same smug expression, until it cracked. I didn't stop to say hello. I walked past him like he was just another face in the crowd. And for the first time in my life, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. Not because of who I used to be. But because of who I had become. This wasn't a comeback. This was an arrival. And I was just getting started. Ryan tried to act like it was nothing. Like my presence didn't shake the very foundation of the building he once thought he'd rule. I watched from the corner of the room as he adjusted his tie 5 times before the executive meeting started, pretending not to notice me seated beside Daniel at the head of the table. But I saw the flicker in his eyes. The disbelief. The panic. And that was before he found out what my role actually was. Daniel introduced me last. This is Ella Cole, he said, calm and direct. She's overseeing the integration process, as well as reviewing promotion pathways and team performance alignment across both companies. The silence in the room was deafening. They all realized at once that I wasn't just the CEO's wife. I was the one holding the keys to every future they had mapped out. Including Ryan's. After the meeting, Ryan tried to catch me in the hallway. Ella, can we talk? I stopped, tilted my head. We're talking. His eyes scanned me like he was searching for the girl he used to know. But she was gone. She'd been gone the minute he decided she wasn't polished enough to sit beside him. I didn't know you were married, he said. You disappeared. I smiled politely. I didn't disappear. I evolved. He opened his mouth again, but I was already walking away. There was work to do. Files to review. A company to streamline. I didn't come back for him. I came back to finish what I started. Over the next few weeks, I reviewed every team in the company, department by department. I met with department heads, analyzed performance charts, cross-referenced budgets. And Ryan's name kept showing up, in places it shouldn't have. Campaigns he took credit for but clearly didn't lead. Expenses that didn't quite add up. Metrics that were inflated just enough to raise a red flag. I flagged them quietly, passed them to the audit team, and watched the wheels start turning. Ryan, in the meantime, kept trying to talk to me. He was careful about it, never during meetings, never in front of Daniel. Just in the hallways, or at the company cafe, or once, awkwardly, in the elevator. He tried small talk first. Then nostalgia. Then flattery. It was like watching a magician fumble through a routine when the audience already knew every trick. You've changed, he said one day. You're colder. I turned to him and said, no, Ryan. I'm clearer. He didn't like that. He started pulling his usual tactics, networking, schmoozing, trying to charm the higher-ups. But they didn't respond the way he expected. Because now, I was the higher-up. The senior managers took their cues from me. The interns wanted to be me. And the other women in the building looked at me like I was a storm that had blown through and rearranged the hierarchy. Daniel noticed it too. One night, after a late meeting, he leaned back in his chair and asked, that guy, Ryan. He used to be someone to you? I didn't flinch. He used to think I wasn't enough. Daniel nodded slowly. And now? Now, I said, he's waiting for a promotion I control. He smiled at that. Not with amusement, but with respect. He knew I wasn't after petty revenge. I was after justice, strategic, silent, permanent. The audit report came back 3 days later. It was worse than I thought. Ryan had been padding campaign reports for over a year. Budget overruns were hidden under vague entries. He used junior staff's work as his own. And he was dangerously close to securing a promotion based on lies. I brought the file to Daniel. He read it quietly, then looked at me. Want to lead the meeting? He asked. You've earned it. So I scheduled a review session with Ryan, under the pretense of finalizing team evaluations. He walked in trying to play confident, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't sure what version of me he'd get. The old one who waited for his attention. Or the new one who signed his checks. I gave him the report. Watched his face pale as he flipped through the pages. You've been sloppy, I said. And arrogant. But worst of all, you underestimated the system. He tried to deny it, of course. Blamed team miscommunication, claimed misunderstanding. I let him talk. Let him dig. Then I placed a signed letter in front of him. A demotion offer. Lower pay. Fewer responsibilities. A quiet way out. Or, I said, we can go the formal route. HR, legal, internal memos. Your call. He stared at the letter, stunned. You're doing this to me? He said, voice cracking. You were supposed to care about me. I stood. I did. Once. But then you showed me exactly who you were. And now, I'm just returning the favor. I walked out before he could respond. Behind me, the glass door swung closed. In front of me, the entire office seemed to hold its breath. I wasn't done yet. But I was getting close. The office felt different after that meeting. People moved with more caution, glanced over their shoulders a little more, like they were suddenly aware that the woman they used to ignore now had the power to rearrange their futures. Ryan didn't take the demotion offer, not immediately. He tried to stall, begged for more time, said he needed to review the details. What he really needed was a miracle. But this wasn't a story built on divine intervention. This was a story built on choices. His. Daniel supported me fully. He didn't question the audit, didn't flinch when I handed him the full report with every discrepancy highlighted. You did what had to be done, he said. And yet, he never overstepped. He let me lead. Let me own it. That was the difference between him and Ryan. Ryan wanted someone to make him look better. Daniel wanted someone who made things better. I kept things professional. No showboating. No gossip. Just clean processes and quiet dominance. I started running integration workshops, sessions where I would present case studies of successful cross-department projects. I could feel eyes on me during every presentation. The same colleagues who once whispered that I was too plain, too quiet, too intense. They now sat at the edge of their seats, scribbling notes, nodding when I spoke. Even Claire stopped wearing her smug little smirk. She avoided eye contact altogether now, and I noticed she began taking personal days more frequently. The moment that changed everything came at the quarterly town hall. Daniel and I stood together on stage, addressing both legacy teams and the new acquisitions. He announced our new vision, our growth roadmap, our expansion into emerging markets. Then he turned the mic over to me. None of this would be possible without the strategic brilliance of Ella Cole. She's not just my partner in life, she's the architect behind our next chapter. A pause. Then applause. Genuine, thunderous, echoing off the walls of the very building where I was once dismissed as invisible. I caught Ryan in the back of the room. He wasn't clapping. He looked like someone who realized he bet on the wrong horse, and lost the entire race. After the town hall, I returned to my office to find a letter slipped under my door. Handwritten. From Ryan. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. Regret. Apologies. Maybe even a plea for a second chance, framed under some self-discovery nonsense. I slid it into a drawer without reading it. Not out of cruelty. Out of irrelevance. Because nothing he could say now mattered. That weekend, Daniel and I hosted a private dinner at our home for key investors and department heads. It was elegant, understated, powerful. I wore a simple black gown, the same one I wore the night Ryan said I wasn't polished enough. This time, the room stopped when I entered. I didn't need diamonds or labels. I had presence. And it was earned. Daniel gave a short speech thanking the team for their adaptability during the merger. Then he raised a glass to me. To Ella, who sees what others don't. Who leads without noise, wins without war, and never forgets where she came from. I caught the eye of one of the senior directors who used to ignore my emails. He looked genuinely odd. And that was when I knew I had become something far more powerful than anyone at that company ever expected. I had become undeniable. The next Monday, Ryan officially accepted the demotion. The HR department processed it quickly, and within days, his nameplate was removed from his old office. He now sat 2 floors down, near the interns, working on back-end analytics instead of client strategy. I passed him once in the stairwell. He tried to speak. I didn't stop. I didn't need closure. I didn't need revenge speeches or dramatic declarations. Because real power doesn't scream. It doesn't posture. It doesn't demand attention. Real power walks past you in silence, holding everything you once thought you deserved. And I was just getting started. They say success is the best revenge, but that's only half the truth. Success is satisfying. But real revenge? That's when the people who doubted you are forced to watch you lead, while pretending not to flinch every time you speak. That's what the office became after Ryan's fall. No one dared question my decisions anymore. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't even need to say much. I had become the standard everyone measured themselves against. It started subtly. People began copying my formatting style on reports. My feedback in meetings became gospel. Interns whispered that getting a compliment from Ella Cole meant more than getting a raise. I didn't chase the spotlight. But it found me. And Ryan couldn't escape it. He avoided me now. Would take alternate elevators, dodge meetings, shuffle awkwardly in team sinks when I entered the room. But the real blow hadn't landed yet. Not until the executive nominations rolled out. Every year, Daniel's company held a private review for director-level promotions. It was formal, rigorous, and ruthless. This time, because of the merger, we decided to overhaul the entire process. I was in charge. Anonymous scorecards. Peer evaluations. Performance metrics. And for the first time ever, reputation risk assessment. I didn't rig it. I didn't need to. Ryan's past caught up to him all on its own. The campaigns he'd stolen, the reports he'd padded, the interns he'd brushed off. It all came back through the scorecards. He ranked near the bottom in leadership, collaboration, and integrity. When the final names were reviewed, he didn't even make the shortlist. The announcement came during a leadership retreat. We hosted it at a resort 2 hours outside the city. A blend of work and image building. It was Daniel's idea, and it gave me the perfect stage. We gathered in the main hall. Champagne. Applause. Slides on screen with the new directors' names. Ryan sat at the back, his face blank. I watched the moment he realized he wasn't on the list. The moment he realized the man he had once tried to impress by dumping me was now shaking my hand as the architect of the company's future. And the woman he left behind? She was the one deciding who rose and who disappeared. After the ceremony, I found myself alone on the balcony. The night air was cool, still. Daniel joined me quietly. He didn't take it well, he said. I didn't ask who. We both knew. He'll leave, I said. Eventually. Men like him don't stay long when they're not the center. Daniel leaned on the railing. Do you want him gone? I thought about it. About all the things Ryan said that used to echo in my head at night. Too focused on work. Not polished enough. Not wife material. I thought about the years I spent proving I was more than what he ever saw. Then I answered, I don't care if he stays or goes. I've already won. Because that was the truth. I wasn't here to destroy Ryan. I was here to become someone untouchable. And I had. He just happened to be in the building when it happened. Later that night, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Claire. Pale, nervous, eyes darting like she was deciding whether to speak or run. Can we talk? She asked. I let her in. She didn't sit. Just stood there clutching a wine glass like it was armor. I didn't know he was dating you when I met him, she said. He said you were just some clingy girl from work. That he was doing you a favor by breaking it off. I stared at her. Not with anger. With pity. He lied to both of us, I said. But the difference is, I didn't stay fooled. She blinked. Looked down. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For how I acted. For everything. I nodded once. That was all she was going to get from me. She wasn't the enemy. She was just another pawn he used to climb. And like every pawn, she'd been discarded when she no longer helped him win. Claire left quietly. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't in a while, peace. Not from an apology. But from the knowledge that I didn't need to explain who I had become. The world saw it. And so did the ones who tried to shrink me. By the time the retreat ended, I had 3 new directors under my leadership. A mentorship program under proposal. And a speaking invitation from one of the top women in tech panels in the country. Ryan didn't congratulate me. He barely looked in my direction when we boarded the shuttle back to the city. But I felt his eyes on me the entire ride. And that was enough. When the industry magazine came out, I didn't even know I was on the cover. A colleague handed it to me during a meeting, eyes wide, pointing to the bold white letters across the top, the quiet powerhouse. Ella Cole and the future of leadership. There I was. Crisp black blazer. Calm expression. Story on page 12. Daniel smiled when he saw it. Ryan? He turned pale. I never asked for the attention. But when it came, I didn't hide from it. The article detailed my rise, the post-merger success metrics, the sudden improvement in company culture. There was a line in the piece that stood out. She doesn't raise her voice, but when she speaks, rooms stop moving. I'd spent years being talked over, dismissed, redirected. And now I was the center of gravity. People I hadn't spoken to in years started emailing. Former coworkers, ex-classmates, even old professors. One message came from a recruiter who once told me I wasn't the right fit for a major firm. He wanted to talk about a partnership now. I didn't reply. Daniel threw a celebration dinner. Not for the article, but for the performance numbers. We doubled client retention, tripled investor confidence, and opened a new headquarters in another city. The board credited my leadership for the turnaround. I credited my clarity. When you stop asking for approval, you start making real moves. Ryan's world shrank. I could see it happening. His name stopped appearing in project briefs. He was taken off client-facing roles. He still came in early, left late, tried to prove his worth, but it was desperate. And obvious. One day I passed his new desk. Smaller. Near the window, but not in the good way. He looked up. Our eyes met. You made your point, he said. Just like that. Bitter. Quiet. Almost angry. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't interested in making a point. I was building an empire. And he was just someone who once stood in the way. That week, Daniel forwarded me a report. Anonymous employee feedback. Most of it praised the leadership transition. But one comment caught my eye: there's someone on the strategy team who's been taking credit for junior staff work. It's demoralizing. If it doesn't change, I'm out. There was no name. But I knew. I called a meeting with the HR director and suggested something bold: an internal ethics review. Ryan cracked during the interviews. Blamed everyone but himself. Said the juniors were lazy, that he was forced to clean up their work. But the timestamps told another story. So did the interns. And when it was over, the recommendation was unanimous: termination. Daniel left the final decision to me. I'll support whatever you choose, he said. You want him gone? It's done. I stared at the file. Part of me expected to feel vindicated. Powerful. But what I really felt was nothing. Ryan had become irrelevant. Still, a message had to be sent. So I drafted the letter. Final paycheck. No references. Quiet exit. I handed it to HR. By the end of the day, he was gone. There was no announcement. No drama. Just an empty desk. A few hushed whispers. And a ripple of relief that passed through the office like wind. I never saw him again. But a week later, I received another envelope. No return address. Inside was the ring he once bought Claire. Returned. Pawned. Who knows? Beneath it, a single note: you were always better than me. I just didn't see it until it was too late. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I dropped the ring in a drawer and went back to work. Because I wasn't living in the past. I was leading the future. There's a strange silence that follows the removal of someone like Ryan. A silence that feels more like breathing room than absence. After he left, things shifted. The office became lighter. People started speaking up more in meetings, interns pitched ideas without fear of being dismissed, and collaboration didn't feel like a performance anymore. I didn't need to tell anyone that things had changed, they could feel it. And that was the point. Real leadership isn't loud. It's the quiet removal of obstacles. I didn't mention Ryan again. Not to Daniel. Not to anyone. But the building remembered. And that memory lingered. Claire didn't last much longer either. She transferred to another department a month later, an internal move that felt more like an escape. I heard through someone in HR that she'd started dating someone else and that she didn't want to be around reminders. I understood. Regret is a heavy mirror to carry. Meanwhile, I focused on building something sustainable. I launched the mentorship program I'd been planning since the merger. A quiet initiative at first. Pairing senior women with younger employees who showed potential but lacked confidence. It became one of the most popular programs we'd ever introduced. Not because it was flashy, but because it filled a gap that had been ignored for years. I wasn't just trying to lead. I was trying to leave something behind that would last longer than applause. At the annual shareholder gala, Daniel introduced me to a few foreign investors. One of them, an older woman with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, pulled me aside and said, "You don't rise like this by accident. Someone underestimated you, didn't they?" I smiled. "More than one," I said. She laughed. "Good. Let them keep doing it. The best revenge is how high they have to look up to see you now." The next quarter was our strongest yet. New hires, record profits, client satisfaction through the roof. Daniel and I celebrated in our own way. A quiet dinner, a toast, a walk through the city we now helped shape. He never asked for credit. Never stood in front of me. He stood beside me. That's what made him different. That's what made him worthy. One night, while reviewing our expansion strategy, Daniel looked up from the documents and said, "Do you ever miss the old version of your life?" I thought about it. The girl who stayed late at that old firm hoping someone would notice her work. The one who waited for a man to see her worth instead of realizing it herself. "No," I said. "She died the night someone told her she wasn't wife material." Daniel nodded. "Good. Because that girl wouldn't have built this." I leaned back in my chair, the skyline glittering behind us, and for the first time in years, I felt still. Not because everything was perfect. But because everything was finally mine. I received one final message from Ryan months later. A connection request on a professional platform. No note. No explanation. Just a silent knock on a door that had been welded shut long ago. I deleted it without hesitation. Because here's what people like him never understand: the things they say to diminish you echo in your mind far longer than they realize. But so do the decisions you make after. I could have let his words define me. I could have shrunk. Disappeared. Chased his approval or tried to prove him wrong on his terms. But instead, I built my own terms. And then I married the man who respected them. The company's success story became a case study in business schools by the end of that fiscal year. Everyone wanted to know how a merger that should have caused chaos instead produced record growth, higher retention, and industry respect. I was invited to panels, podcasts, even keynote events. At first, I declined most of them. I didn't build this to become a public figure. But eventually, I agreed to one. An event focused on women in leadership, hosted by the same university where Ryan and I once studied side by side. The auditorium was full. Students, faculty, professionals from across industries. I walked out onto the stage, the lights blinding for a second, and when they dimmed enough for me to see the audience, I noticed a familiar figure sitting 3 rows back. Ryan. Older now. His suit looked borrowed, or maybe just worn one too many times. He was alone. His eyes didn't leave me once. I spoke calmly, clearly. Not about him. Not even about the company. But about what it takes to rise when no one believes in you. I talked about building in silence. About being dismissed, passed over, called too much or not enough. I told them how I used to edit someone else's presentations, how I once celebrated wins that weren't mine, how I was told I didn't belong at the table. And then I told them what changed. Not luck. Not marriage. Clarity. Boundaries. Knowing that being overlooked doesn't mean being incapable, it just means they haven't seen what you can do when you're not shrinking to fit their vision. The applause was thunderous. I left the stage without looking back. But outside, just past the doors, Ryan was waiting. That speech, he said, was about me, wasn't it? I didn't answer. He kept going. You know, I didn't mean it when I said you weren't wife material. I was just young. Stupid. I finally looked at him. You were honest. That's the part you can't undo. He looked at the ground. Do you ever think about how things might have been different? All the time, I said. But not because I miss you. Because I'm grateful. You pushed me out of a life that would have kept me small. He blinked, caught between shame and something that looked like sorrow. I lost everything, he said quietly. My job. My reputation. Claire left. I'm freelancing now. It's not much. I studied him. The man who once measured worth by titles, who walked away from me to chase power he never really earned. That's the thing about shortcuts, I said. They only look smart until the real builders pass you. I walked away before he could say another word. Weeks later, I got word from an old colleague that Ryan had moved out of the city. No one knew where he went. His name faded from conversations. From reports. From relevance. And me? I stayed busy. I mentored. I hired. I built. Daniel and I took a short break from work and traveled for the first time in months. A villa by the coast. No meetings. Just wine, sea air, and quiet mornings. One night, we sat on the terrace overlooking the ocean. He reached for my hand and asked, if you could do it all again, would you change anything? I looked out at the waves, thought about all the pain, the silence, the slow climb back. Then I smiled. Not a single thing. Because every time someone told me I wasn't enough, I became more. Every room that didn't open, I built my own. And every man who tried to define my worth only ended up proving it when they watched me rise without them. The final phase of my journey wasn't marked by one dramatic moment or headline. It was built on something quieter: consistency. Influence. Legacy. The kind of success you don't have to shout about because it speaks for itself. My mentorship program expanded to 3 more offices. Interns I once guided were now department leads. Our company was listed as one of the best places to work, not just because of the profits, but because of the culture we rebuilt from the ground up. And I never forgot what that culture used to be. I remembered the feeling of being dismissed. Overlooked. Told to wait my turn while someone less capable spoke over me. That memory fueled every decision I made as a leader. Daniel and I celebrated our 3rd anniversary quietly. Just the 2 of us, cooking dinner at home, laughing over stories from our early startup days. He never made me choose between ambition and love. He respected both. He built with me, not for me. And the deeper our success grew, the more I realized that I hadn't just found the right partner in business, I had finally chosen the right partner in life. Not the man who saw me as baggage on the way up, but the one who handed me the map and said, "You drive." My name was now attached to investment panels, advisory boards, and keynote invitations across the country. But I kept a framed photo in my office of the desk where I started, cramped, overlooked, always passed by. It reminded me of who I used to be. Not because I missed her, but because she deserved to be remembered. She survived the heartbreak. She survived being told she wasn't enough. And she made me. Once, during a company event, a new intern approached me nervously. "Is it true," she asked, "that you used to work here before all this?" I smiled. "Yes. A long time ago." "What changed?" she asked. I looked at her eager eyes and shaking hands holding a notebook too big for her bag. And I said, "Someone told me I wasn't wife material. So I became something harder to define. I became undeniable." That answer traveled fast. I saw it posted online, quoted on screens, turned into slides at leadership conferences. But I didn't care about the fame. I cared about the girls sitting at desks like I once did, wondering if they had to become smaller to be chosen. I wanted them to know they didn't. Eventually, Ryan became a footnote. Someone people vaguely remembered. A cautionary tale about arrogance, shortcuts, and underestimating the quiet ones. I heard he took a job in a small firm somewhere in another state. I never saw him again. And if he ever searched for my name, he'd find a list of accomplishments longer than any apology he could have written. In the end, I didn't just marry his boss. I became the kind of woman whose story outlived every man who thought she needed them to rise. My name wasn't stamped onto someone else's empire. It was etched into the foundation of one I built myself. I used to think revenge meant watching someone fall. But real revenge? It's building a life so solid, so bright, so far above where they left you, that they can never touch it. And they know it. Because I didn't just climb the ladder. I bought the building. I rewrote the rules. And I did it wearing the title he said I'd never deserve. Wife. CEO. Architect. Power. But most of all, Ella. On my terms. Always.